It's less than a week to go before the budget is announced, and it's apparently elbows out at the Cabinet table, or at least that's what the papers are reporting. We're told that there's battles going on behind the scenes as ministers try to secure money for their departments. You'd swear that this was a government that made every single penny count. Of course, then we read the latest damning Controller and Auditor General report about enormous levels of waste across the government and public bodies. 20 million wasted on renting unoccupied offices, 248,000 on unused hotel rooms for Gardaí for one event, tens of millions of euro of public money flushed down the drain. Because of the same old story, no controls, no oversight, no accountability. Minister, never before has a government had so much money to spend and achieved so little. In the last government, the opportunity that those record budget surpluses represented were wasted on one-off measures. What do we have to show for it? An ever-widening gap between rich and poor, a worsening housing disaster, threadbare disability services and crumbling infrastructure. The most alarming thing is it seems no lessons have been learnt. We're not hearing anything from this government that indicates you want to change course. Minister, that's why the kite flying about this year's budget is so concerning. If leaks are anything to go by, this will be an uninspiring budget that just tinkers around the edges. What strikes me is the lack of ambition and the absence of any imagination. The disconnect is staggering. Where is the understanding of how much some people are struggling? Where is the ambition to do better? Where are the big ideas? Where are the radical measures that could make a real difference in making this country more affordable and more equal? Minister, this afternoon the Social Democrats will be announcing our alternative budget to show people that there is another way, that it is possible to drive down the costs for families and target money wisely. Our plan includes a second tier of child benefit that would lift 40,000 children out of poverty, a weekly cost of disability payment, abolishing the means test for carers, a reduction in childcare fees of €200 per month, as well as finally rolling out a public model. Plans for the state to acquire a modular housing factory to turbocharge the delivery of affordable homes, and a €400 energy credit for households in the bottom 40% of income. Minister, can you tell me if you support any of these ideas, and if so, why isn't the government adopting any of them?
Minister O'Callaghan.
Yeah, thanks very much, Deputy Cairns. And the first thing I'd say is I haven't noticed any elbows out at Cabinet when it comes to budget negotiations. In fairness to each Cabinet Minister and each Minister, their objective is to try to ensure that they can get sufficient resources to fund their department for the year ahead. I know in my own area of justice that's something I'm seeking to do, but I also have to be conscious and responsible that we need to keep restraint on public spending. But notwithstanding that, we find ourselves in a very unique position in this country that we have a very large surplus. We're not in a position where other countries find themselves, where they don't have a surplus, and in many countries they can't increase spending in any specific area. It's also important to point out, Deputy, that this didn't happen by accident. The surplus that we have arises as a result of political decisions that were made by governments in the past. So when you're criticising this government, just recall the fact that the reason we're in such a sound financial state is because of decisions that were made by previous governments in this country, and they deserve credit for that. We decided that we would try to adopt an open economy that would attract in outside investment, that would have the effect of creating large surpluses which we could spend for the benefit of our citizens. I agree with you, Deputy, in terms of some of your criticism about the Comptroller that the Comptroller and Auditor General identified in his report. I previously spoke to Deputy MacDonald in respect of the chapter on iPass. You've identified another chapter within the report which related to wholly unnecessary expenditure by An Garda Síochána in respect of rooms for the Euro finals last year that subsequently weren't accommodated. That type of spending should not have occurred. The Gardaí have accepted the recommendations of the Comptroller and Auditor General in his report, and they now recognise that they should not be booking rooms that far in advance, or if they are, they don't need to book them all. And secondly, they need to ensure that they have an appropriate cancellation policy in place that will ensure that the state and the Gardaí are not left in a position where they have to meet such a large bill for unaccommodated members. I'm very pleased to hear that the Social Democrats will today be launching their pre-budget submission. I have no doubt that Ministers Donoghue and Chambers will give careful consideration to it. I note what you state in terms of some of the proposals you're putting out there, and I have no doubt with Deputy O'Callaghan beside you that you'll have carefully crafted the expenditure that's to be spent on them. But as the Taoiseach said yesterday, Deputy, this comes down to a matter of choices. And the choices you've identified there may be all creditable and appropriate, but obviously they will have impact on other types of expenditure as well. So what I can assure you is that government will give consideration to the Social Democrats' budget. I can't give you any assurance that we will adopt the policies put out in your budget. It's not the case, however, that simply because they're in your budget we won't give them consideration. The ministers will, but you'll be able to find out what's in the budget next week.
Minister, I do recognise the big surpluses, and something that Social Democrats highlight every year at budget time, and indeed throughout the year, is that they need to be spent wisely because they're not necessarily forever. So it's exactly a year ago today since the last budget, a giveaway on steroids, basically to try to buy the election. And now that there's no election on the horizon, your government have suddenly realised that untargeted one-off measures are not a good idea. As if giving €100 million in energy credits to owners of holiday homes ever made sense. Meanwhile, last year, the number of children living in consistent poverty doubled. I'm just going to repeat that. Record budget surpluses, €100 million to holiday home owners, and the number of children living in consistent poverty doubled. Minister, this government has and the last one has consistently squandered opportunities to make a real difference to those children's lives. Budgets are about choices, and this government has a big choice to make next week in terms of how it spends public money. The Social Democrats have outlined a number of suggestions and new ideas that would alleviate child poverty. Will this government reconsider introducing a second tier of child benefit payment?
Minister O'Callaghan.
Yeah, thanks very much, Deputy. I think it's unfair of you to describe the budget that was introduced last year as a giveaway on steroids. And in fact, when the one-off measures were introduced, I don't remember anyone in opposition describing them as that. In fact, I think they were wholeheartedly accepted and there was no criticism of them by opposition members. In terms of child poverty is an extremely important issue from the point of view of the government, and I've no doubt that when you see the budget that's going to be announced next week, you'll see recognition given to the importance of child poverty from the government's point of view. In terms of a second tier of children's allowance, as you had identified, again, Deputy, I can't give you an assurance or confirmation as to what's going to be in the budget. A measure such as that, as I'm sure you'll appreciate and as I'm sure you'll have costed, will have significant consequences in terms of expenditure elsewhere. But I can assure you, as I identified before, that both Ministers Donoghue and Ministers Chambers will give careful consideration to what's contained within the Social Democrats' pre-budget submission.